All right, grab a beer, some pizza, grab a seat. We're going to get started. I'm Ryan Frederick. I get the privilege of having a conversation with somebody once a month as part of this event that we call Startup Grind. Startup Grind is a global organization. I was talking with somebody earlier. I think I should know this. I've been a part of the organization for probably 10 years now and running the chapter in Columbus for 8. But I think we're in 800 cities now across the world or something, crazy like that. We have our global conference coming up in Silicon Valley, Redwood City. There'll be, 7,000 of us meeting on Redwood City, taking over the theater there and essentially all of downtown Redwood City. So that's always it's always fun to go hang out with the Startup Grind family. As part of that, I need to, because I told him that I would call him out at the beginning because I never remember to acknowledge him properly. Alex Brown is in the back, the guy looking like the attorney is an attorney. And Alex is a good friend of mine, and he's with a firm called Dickinson Wright. And Alex started coming to Startup Grind really early when nobody cared that this was happening, and there would be 2 people here, and most of them, were related to me. And Alex came, and Alex supported, and he has remained a sponsor even after changing law firms. We won't mention the previous law firm because he's not there anymore. But if you need legal services, and I was joking with Harley, hey Harley, that the startup ecosystem and community runs through Alex, and Alex does most of the consequential legal work for startups in town too. So if you need that sort of thing, talk to him. There, I gave you a proper sponsor intro for maybe the first time in like 5 years. 5 years. Right? Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you to Katie and Terry from our team at AWH. We're a product software and data consulting firm, so if you need something like that, talk to Terry or Katie, and they can get you to the right people on our team. This is Catherine Alshouse from Veeva. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely, happy to.
So we were having some good conversation before we started about some interesting topics that we'll get into that weren't even things that we had planned to discuss, but fascinating stuff. So give us the Veeva founding story. How does Veeva even come to exist, and who did it, and why did they do it?
Yeah, so has anyone here heard of Veeva? Okay, great. Does anyone know what Veeva does? Yes, a few, that's great. And are you inside life sciences? Or outside? You are, okay, so that makes sense. But it's nice to see it's actually getting outside the life sciences space. So Veeva was founded in 2007 in Silicon Valley. We're headquartered in Pleasanton, California. And we were the first industry cloud company. So enterprise software, but for a vertical, what we used to call verticals, right? For a specific industry cloud. So, to know Veeva, you need to know its founder, both of them. So the founder's story, Peter Gassner, kind of starts back when I first met Peter at PeopleSoft. Has anybody here been a former customer of PeopleSoft? I had code in every release up until version 8 or so. Yes, great. Oh, good. There was a hostile acquisition thing with Oracle that we don't speak of. There's scarring, but. So Veeva was founded by Peter. Peter was my boss back at PeopleSoft, and at PeopleSoft he was responsible for about 600 people in the tools and technology division. So after the hostile acquisition sort of started, Peter starts thinking, all right, where am I going to go next? He had this vision of being able to, as an enterprise software company, you could see it moving to the cloud. What happens after you're in the cloud and you want to enable your customers to actually develop on your platform? So PeopleSoft is a great company, but the CEO just kind of didn't get that and wasn't having it. But he met a guy named Mark Benioff who got it completely. So Peter joined Mark at Salesforce before the IPO and was Mark's number 2. So he ran as SVP of Products and Technology the product for Salesforce. And his idea became Force.com. So the platform sold to customers where you could develop on the platform and extend it beyond just enterprise software was always kind of an idea in Peter's mind. So fast forward, he has a great career at Salesforce, but now he's thinking, what's next? So you have enterprise cloud software, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Workday are the big three, right? But what about these sort of deeply intricate industry segments that don't yet have a solution in the cloud? And if you recall back, for those of you like me that are maybe 50 plus maybe, this is exactly the same pattern that happened with on-premise enterprise software. You had generic on-premise software, and then you had verticals developed over time with telecommunications and retail and so forth. So history having a way of repeating itself, that's exactly what happened with Veeva. So Veeva was Peter's idea to be the first enterprise cloud software company for a specific industry. So he picked life sciences because Peter's an odd guy. He's super brilliant, and he said, what is the absolute hardest problem to solve out there? I want the most highly regulated, difficult to comply with, hard problem with this huge barrier to entry that nobody wants to be in. And everybody said, go in pharmaceutical manufacturing and life sciences. So that's actually a big part of kind of how he wanted to start this whole enterprise cloud journey. So not having that background himself, classic startup story. You get your technical co-founder, you get your domain co-founder. He didn't.
Did they know each other?
They did not know each other. And not only did they not go to Stanford together or work at Amazon together or whatever, they were bi-coastal. So we've got Peter on the West Coast and Matt on the East Coast, and they never met. Peter just kept getting referred to Matt the entire time. Matt Wallach, you got to talk to Matt Wallach if you want to launch in pharma. Okay, so they bet. So they're not in a garage. It's like literally a recipe for disaster with two people who have never met on the complete opposite sides of the country. But that's what worked. That's what they made it work together. So that's kind of the long answer to your how did Veeva get started and why. But any startup story is about its people. And it really was about Matt and Peter at the beginning. Matt is now retired. He's a member of our board, and Peter continues on today as the CEO. He's my boss, again.
So inside of that, given the fact that they built a very targeted product for a very challenging space, did they know sort of at the beginning that, or how long did it take before they had insights into the fact that they were onto something that could be pretty big and that was pretty high potential? Or did it take a while for that realization to happen?
They really had big goals from the beginning. So painting it as kind of the launch of a new type of company really was what they were thinking. They weren't thinking this is going to be, a niche organization that today 49 of the largest, of the 50 largest pharmaceutical manufacturers run on Veeva, and most of them were early customers. So
who's the holdout?
I know, right?
Who's the last one?
Yeah, they're on a massive internally built system, and they really like our product. It's just not in the cards for them to move right now. Eventually, we'll get them.
At some point, it'll be hard for them not to, right?
Yeah.
If everybody else, because you talk about the ability to share data and integration and all that sort of stuff, right?
Which is, that's a big part of the strategy.
Across industry, inside an industry like that, everybody's as cooperative as they are competitive in many situations and cases, right?
Yeah, that can definitely be true. Especially, it's a very interesting, the interesting dynamics inside pharma. So all of life sciences, we've expanded beyond just pharmaceuticals now. So medical devices and all these advances that are happening at the same time as Veeva was founded. So we sort of advanced together, right? There's personalized medicine, all these gene therapies. This confluence of technology and life sciences sort of perfectly matched when Veeva sort of entered the market. That's just straight up luck, which is another big part of any startup success.
Yeah, but timing matters more than most people give it credit for, right?
That's true.
In starting a company. If you get the timing right, your ability to make it work goes up exponentially, and if the timing isn't good, your ability to see that through and have the stamina to wait for the timing to be right, everybody runs out of runway, runs out of money, runs out of patience, et cetera.
That's right, and I think one factor in Veeva's success is that because the mindset of these companies were internally turning to how do you use technology, as a true advantage, because you can't do things like, advanced gene therapies and this personalized medicine without really large computing power, which wasn't possible until the cloud came along. So because their internal mindset was already, how can we leverage the cloud? How can we think about our core manufacturing business a different way? And enter a new software provider that wants to take, your 50 largest systems and converge them into one cloud-based system. The timing was perfect from that perspective.
So we're going to jump around because it just makes for a better conversation. If we just stay on a linear path too. So you are the global CIO. Mm-hmm. So everything technology now rolls up to you. How do you sort of look at the role? How does the company look at the role? And how do you balance sort of run what's there now and build what you guys want to be running on, say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind as you think about any enterprise software company, and it's a good practice for any cloud company, the best practice is to keep the product engineering, think of it like Boeing that's making planes, it's separate completely from the folks that are running all the internal technology and the production servers. So there's a separation of duties. We're heavily audited, as you might imagine. We're audited by every customer. The FDA indirectly audits us. So the attention paid to things like separation of duties is really important. So I don't have product. I don't have engineering, I don't have product management, I don't have anything to do with what Veeva's product is on the inside. I own the other side. So I have 5 teams at Veeva. I have internal IT, which we're 100% cloud, and that's been an interesting experience in and of itself, actually. So we can talk about that later, but I was not expecting some of the things I found with being at 100% cloud. But you're a cloud vendor, so you have to, right? Practice what you preach.
Yeah, you probably should eat the dog food.
Yeah, and drink the champagne,
Yep.
or whatever the case may be.
That's a very, I positioned it as, well, because I'm probably older than you, so back, in my heyday, we ate the dog food, which is a very, scrappy, downtrodden take.
Yeah.
You were drink the champagne. Good
Yeah,
for you.
exactly. A little French champagne. Yes, so I have quality and compliance. So this is all of the SOC 2s. As a cloud provider, we have to have all the ISOs. I actually like this stuff. It's putting most people to sleep, but that's okay. We have quality and compliance. I have, and then that includes the audit process. I have the CISO, so security reports to me for both the product itself, so all the vulnerability scanning and the penetration testing and such of the application, as well as physical and IT security. I have global facilities just because it had to sit somewhere. So,
and you're in charge of digital security, so why not be in charge of physical security?
Yeah, actually, I'm kidding, but it was a fit because when you build a new building, you need all those other things, right? It's just, hey, Catherine, go negotiate this real estate lease in Spain. Okay, let's isn't that fun though? That's the best part about an early stage company. Yeah, absolutely. So much energy, it's great. And then I have, what did I mention? Am I missing one? Oh, yeah, technical operations. So I have the team that supports the production infrastructure for Veeva. So all this infrastructure, tens of thousands of servers. We pay Amazon probably $3 million a month for their services, and we manage the global product with 18 guys. So it's you can be really, really lean at
how many?
18.
18.
Yeah, 18 people manage production.
I thought it would be a bigger number than that.
Nope.
So there's a benefit to operating the cloud,
Yep.
right?
That's right.
So when you joined and you guys were and are operating the cloud, what surprises were as part of that, as you alluded to a few seconds ago?
So on the IT side, so now you got to kind of move in your mind to, like any other company, Veeva needs an IT department, and we support ERP and the same things everybody else's IT department supports. So at 100% cloud, though, IT is actually not in the middle of a lot of things anymore. And we had to sort of, have this humility, egoless moment where we're like, you know what, you actually kind of don't need us. As long as we vet your vendor and we ensure that they meet all the security criteria we need them to meet. If you're engaging a new cloud provider, we'll help you get a good deal. But if you're not integrating with anything, see ya, and let me know if I can help you later. I mean, there's just really a lot of withdrawal of IT involvement in the pace of the business. one of our core values is speed. That's the type of thing that enables it. Hey, work with me. I'll tell you if you're on the right track, if you're not, whatever, and then go, just run. And that has really kind of boggled my mind to think that, wait a minute, you don't have to pass any of my review boards, or I don't have to have a design review before you deploy to production. It's all cloud-based. There is no deploy to production. If you need help, the vendor's supporting you. So as the CIO, I have a direct relationship with all of the providers and partners that we classified as sort of tier 1 strategic, but so does the CFO, and so does the head of support, and so does the head of services. They also have a direct relationship with their key providers, which is new.
But in a lot of ways, it's the way that it should work, right?
Absolutely.
Because IT always should have been a service organization,
yep.
the rest of the organization, and the fact that IT had the keys to a lot of things, sure, great for the ego, for IT, management and IT stack inside of the company, but not great for efficiencies and not great for the empowering the business to be able to operate as agile as they would like to.
We're out of the way.
They had to come and ask for permission a lot of
yeah,
cases.
And we're now out of the way, which is as it should be.
So let's talk about the tech center here. How did that come to be where Columbus and Dublin more specifically became the place where a tech center for a Silicon Valley based company ended up operating?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So a lot of what you'll see now is these big Valley companies finally figuring out that the great engineer they just hired over there moved there from Michigan, I shouldn't use that example, moved here from the great state of Ohio,
there are no
like 2 weeks ago. So they're finally actually connecting the fact that this is actually one pool of people, and why not move your headquarters or your development headquarters or general business headquarters to a place where you can find all of that talent, but at a usually actually much more attractive place to live. I could go on and on about why people would want, people like me, would want to move from the Bay Area to Ohio, but at a much lower price point. I mean, that's really a big piece of the bottom line is we're very focused on not being an HQ-centric company, and we still have the majority of the employees, like it's the biggest office in Pleasanton, California, but it is by far not the majority of the overall number of employees. There's about 600 people at corporate headquarters and about 3,700 in the company totally. So why did we pick Columbus and Dublin? We actually looked at 5 or 6 different cities. We looked at kind of the usual cast of characters, Austin, Indianapolis, Nashville, Columbus, and ended up choosing Columbus because a couple of reasons actually. The talent pipeline was excellent. So starting K-12, we looked at public schools, we looked at secondary education, we looked at tertiary education. So with the nation's largest university right here in Ohio, that was a huge draw because this is a general business office. So we need not only engineering from computer science departments, but we also need people in finance from business school, and we need many other kind of types. So we need security engineers, we need IT people, we need all different kinds. So we didn't necessarily need to locate right next to only an engineering school. We wanted a great set of education options for that pipeline that covered the whole spectrum. And we found that here. We also found we found a really vibrant technology community. I lived in Cincinnati for a while. Cincinnati's awesome. It's got a lot of great things going for it, and they're really good at some things, like the whole K-12 to college education pipeline for tech, but nowhere near like this for sharing of ideas and companies coming together and really selflessly kind of discussing openly, hey, what worked for you and what worked for you, and I tried it and I didn't like it. That's really cool, and it's unique, I think, to this area. Beyond that, it's people want to live here, they want to move here. I've hired people from Pittsburgh and St. Louis and New Jersey, and they all want to move here.
Of course, people from Pittsburgh want to move here. No.
I told them they could not remain fans of the home team. They had to switch to, something.
And there's apparently a football game happening tonight between two Tigers that, the Buckeyes aren't involved in, so we don't really care about that. So when did you join the company? And I'm assuming you were aware of the company before you joined, given the fact that you knew Peter from PeopleSoft.
Right. Yeah, so that was an interesting one too. So I had a friend of mine who was a former CIO at Fifth Third Bank found this job posting online for a CIO at Veeva. Poor Joe calls me up. He's like, "Hey, Catherine, it looks like you're connected to a lot of people at this company called Veeva, and I'm interested in this position." And I'm like, "What's posted out there?" So I read it, and I'm like, I got to tell you, Joe, I'm actually probably going to apply for this role. So I call up Peter.
So you undercut your friend?
Absolutely. I sent him a really nice bottle of wine, though. I was honest.
That's great honesty.
That is absolutely open about the whole thing. Anyway, so I call up Peter.
Did he apply too?
No.
Okay. So
he didn't like it after he found out what it was actually.
Not to apply. Wow, you're a very good negotiator.
He's got his own business now, and he's doing great.
He's doing okay.
He's
okay,
doing
good.
very well. I still love him. Once he found out you also had to be the site leader, he was less interested. So it worked out. It all worked out. But yeah, so I called Peter up. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. He posed the CIO role for an enterprise software company, like 50 miles from where I was. I'm like, "Why did you post what is obviously my role for other people to apply to? I don't understand."
And
he's like, "Catherine, I forgot you were in Ohio." So yeah, the rest was history. There's probably 30 of us or so that are former PeopleSoft people. We went, just to take it back to the beginning of the conversation about people, it really is all about who is in the role and people that are in the role. And I'd worked with Peter before. He knows I'm just ridiculously, detail-oriented and operations-oriented, and he could just sort of let go of that part and not worry about it, and that's what he was looking for. So yeah, we have a very odd approach to hiring, and the hiring manager, we don't have a recruiting department. So each hiring manager is responsible for sourcing and for engaging with all of the candidates from the very beginning of the process to the very end of the process. So they all have to know their markets, their regional markets, their jobs, comps, all of it. They have to set compensation too. So we don't use recruiters either. It's literally just a direct line.
So how much time does a hiring manager
A lot.
have to account for and attribute to the team?
A lot, but it's intentional and with knowledge that it's not as efficient with time as it would be if we had a recruiting department. But because we put such a high premium on getting the right people in the roles, we're willing to pay the efficiency cost to actually ensure that the people we put in management roles are people, that they get it and they understand how important it is to get the right person in the right role. So. Yeah, it's 4 structured interviews. They all have a specific topic. Everybody understands what they are and what they're supposed to ask and how they talk to people. And it's not to screen anybody out. It's more to screen them in, right? It's more to find, hey, is this the right job for you? Why do you want it? Do you advance your own career goals, or are you, just taking it as a stop on the way, or what's the deal? That we really want to know the whole person. So by that kind of hyper-attentive focus on people, that's been one of the things that's really helped us, once you're on board, move really fast.
How is the company, especially early on? I mean, now the company is now officially a unicorn. When did that happen?
So we hit the $1 billion run rate in Q2 of this past year.
Okay, so it's been about a year.
6 months. Our fiscal year ends on January 31st.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm. And so, does everybody know what being a unicorn means? It means you have a valuation of $1 billion or more, and that's pretty rarefied territory, even now with some paper unicorns. But Veeva certainly isn't that. How has the company evolved over its life cycle, right, to this point? It seems like you've made some very strategic, intentional decisions, like hiring managers, being in charge of their own teams, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What's changed and what has sort of remained the same as the company has gone from having 0 customers to begin with to now being a unicorn?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're 13 years old. We were founded in 2007. We crossed the $1 billion revenue run rate this year. The market cap's $22 billion, I think, as of now. But still, Veeva is actually one of our core operating principles. So Peter is just determined to maintain the speed that got us to where we are, the fast ability to react to the market. He really wants to retain that. It's really hard. I was at a dinner a few months ago with, and I happened to just meet someone who was talking about how they managed to accomplish that. They said we're a $5 billion company now, and we actually feel like we run with the same speed as when we were founded. And that poor guy, I think I cornered him into a brick wall. I'm like, how did you do that? So I'm always looking for insight into how to keep from adding layers and becoming bureaucratic and slowing down. What we don't want to be is your stereotypical kind of large technical company where if you have an idea, you wait for the architecture design and review board to meet quarterly, and if you can't get on the agenda, you have to wait until the one after that one, and someone will sniper your idea down because that's what they like to do. And we really are struggling against
Sounds like
the...
you also lived that existence.
Yeah, more scars. But yeah, that's what we're struggling against. And the gravity wants to take you there. The natural force of growth really wants to take you in that direction. So Peter's constantly sending out emails like, avoid having multiple layers of management in the same meeting. Just let go of it. Don't go. Be strong enough as an executive on his team to say, I don't need to be in that meeting. You guys take care of that. So there's constant little reminders of how to avoid that drag that happens. So quick decision making, get the 3 smartest people in the room that have input into what you're about to do, think hard about it, figure it out, and then just do it. So he says things like you should be right as a leader 80% of the time. So if you're right more than that, then you're not taking enough risk and moving fast enough. And if you're right less than that, then there's a different problem with maybe you're not in the right job. But those kinds of things help us think, and it makes you a little fearless, you sort of, oh gosh, I tried to form an IT steering committee. I can't even believe I did this now that I look back at it, when I first started 2 years ago. And it just did not work at all. And bless their hearts, the head of sales was so nice, and the SVP of services, he managed 3,000 people or something. I mean, they're very kind. They all came, the CFO came, and I have my agenda and my portfolio and my, roadmap and all this. And it was just such the wrong approach. So it ground to a painful halt. And I finally had to just reflect and go, you know what, you guys, this just isn't working. Disbanded. I will let you know what we're doing some other way. So, but that's fine, right? Nobody said, oh, how could you think that? And wow, what's she doing? They just said, okay, great, let's move on. That sort of forgiveness and spirit is a huge part of what keeps you fast and what keeps you going.
Yeah, because you see it all the time where, and it doesn't take companies long. They move quickly at the beginning, they stay close to customers at the beginning, they iterate closely with customers at the beginning, and in some cases, it only takes them getting to 100 customers, and they already start drifting away, right? And they already start creating hierarchy, and they already start creating processes, and they already start things like voice of customer initiatives, which, should never exist at any company, because that's a bullshit thing that you're saying. You are, in tangible terms, saying we are going to represent the voice of the customer instead of actually getting and staying close to the customer. And the fact that you guys have been able to evolve, keeping that mentality and that culture of and not getting sucked in by the gravitational pull that makes you want to put in that hierarchy and all those processes is really awesome. Kudos to you, because that is incredibly hard to pull off. And that's why most large companies suck in innovation and get their lunch eaten by startups, because they get pulled in by the gravitational pull and then they can't get out.
Yes, and what we had to do to prevent that from happening is continue looking at the new areas of Veeva as startups inside Veeva. So we have startup CEOs, there's 2 or 3 of them right now that have brand new products, and Peter is just adamantly in my face, and everybody else is all the time about, do not talk, I don't even want you to talk to them. I do not want to see a meeting on your calendar with Tom Marvel because he is running this startup. So in other words, don't, Catherine, go introduce your operational process overhead on somebody who has 5 people and just is launching his business.
And it's just trying to figure out whether there's something there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So they run as Veeva-funded startups with access. And now, if Tom's got a question about if my product becomes a real product one day, what do I have to think about with security? Then sure, give him some information so he might, be able to see down the road. But that's it. he is very serious about nobody talking, with them about, well, you're going to need to think about a services team now that's separate from, nope, no, it's fine, grow like Veeva grew in the beginning.
I mean, if the core cloud life sciences, software company doesn't work, you guys could open up an innovation consulting firm to go train other big companies on how to be innovative and build new products, because most really struggle setting up a situation like that where you have 3 startups and 3 startup CEOs inside of the company.
Yeah.
That's pretty unheard of, and most don't pull it off.
I don't even get to give them facilities advice. They just go find their own premises and sign a lease, and they're usually terrible. That's right. I'll clean it up later. It's fine.
But you also have to let them make their mistakes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because that's part of the process, right?
What? You don't even have right of first refusal to expand? Yes, that's exactly right. They really truly run as a business, because Peter doesn't care about chairs and desks and, well, I take that back. He cares very much about those things in the main offices, believe me. But he doesn't really care about the supporting pieces of the creation process. He cares about the leader and about them having the resources and the space to run. And not all of them go, of course, right? I mean, some of them just disappear and they didn't work at all. That happens actually pretty frequently.
Yeah.
So.
But that's the reality of the way that it goes down if you're going to spin up a startup outside of Veeva, right? Most of them are not going to work. Most companies don't work. Most don't succeed. It's the same thing is true if you spin them up inside of the company.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how we don't yet, and so it goes against human nature a little bit, but constraints are one of the reasons that startups are innovative and more disruptive than large companies are too, because constraints actually have lots of benefit, right? It forces you to move fast. You have to understand the problem at a deep level. You have to stay and get close to customers, et cetera. And for some reason, when companies begin to have some success and they have access to resources now of every type, they sort of forget how valuable constraints can be in the innovation product process.
I think that's a really important point. So Peter's he's Swiss by heritage, and he inherited every sort of stereotypical wonderful quality of much foresight and thought and systems 2 thinking and precision and then execution. And part of that discipline, he's a very disciplined person. So part of that involved when Veeva was founded. So they took $3 million in angel funding from some former Siebel execs, and then had 1 round of VC for $4 million from Emergence Capital that also funded Salesforce. But they didn't spend a dime of that $4 million from Emergence until the company was already break even. So that discipline to make this a real business, that's what Peter was always thinking about from the day one. How do I run as a real business? Not how many rounds can I run, how much funding can I raise, and how much capital can I use to hire people right away, make the product really big. From the beginning, he was thinking about, no, this has to be a real business. And so he put constraints on himself to think, okay, if I'm going to be profitable, and Veeva's been profitable since its founding, that means I got to think hard about, okay, I'm going to run out of a 1,200 square foot office in downtown Pleasanton for as long as I possibly can. I don't want that constraint in my way. I need to think about audits from the beginning. Veeva's first audit was our 3rd customer, and it was kind of hilarious because the data center was on the premise. So it's like, somebody put those servers up in a rack on the ceiling at least before they get here.
Get them off the floor at least, right?
Yeah, get them off the carpet. Those are very, very early days. But the focus was always, how do you run right now as if you're a business, not in 2 years or in 4 years or in 6 years.
Well, and that is an amazing feat to pull off, the balance of this could be big, we want it to be big, we intend for it to be big, yet we're going to operate in a very controlled manner so that we make sure that along the way we don't put the cart before the horse, and we're profitable throughout the entirety of the process.
Yeah.
That's a unicorn. That is super rare to see that level of control inside of knowing that there's something pretty big on the horizon. It's
control and restraint at the same time. So our revenue growth rate, so our last release was strong, print, top and bottom line, but the revenue growth rate's in the high 20s still, year over year, this year. And our operating margin rounds up to 40%, and that's nuts. So there's just a really good focus on just retaining that discipline all the way through. When the company was started, if you ask Peter what he was thinking about, he said, relentless execution, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about that day. What do I need to do today and in this hour? What is the most important task I can do right now for the customer? Customer success I know that's a trope or whatever, but it was and still is kind of how we think. That's our first value, and it has been since the beginning. Customer success, employee success, and speed, and then do the right thing kind of goes over all of it. But yeah, that's what he would say he was focused on. How do I organize my day to, make that into a week, to make that into a month? Peter will also tell you that the decisions he makes today are for our revenue results in 4 years. So he kind of, plays the chess game of, how I spend this hour is an investment in our 2025 earnings or our 2024 earnings. So he thinks like that too.
So you've got 49 of the 50 largest.
Mm-hmm.
You've been growing 20% a year.
Mm-hmm.
Can it continue, given the fact that you've got 49 of the 50?
So that's just in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we have about 700 customers. We're a global company. We have maybe 28 offices in Asia and Europe and so forth. So we've got a large addressable market. I think we also did a good job of thinking about when you're kind of up here in the adoption curve with your first product, so not here, but up at the, right at the beginning, you're thinking about what is your second product suite already. And if you can get that right, or at least come close, then now you've got a formula for continuity, right? So CRM, for those 49 of 50, was our first launch. And we get to risks, remind me to come back to that. And Peter was already thinking about what is our second act when we're about a third to half the way up that adoption curve. So the second act is Veeva Vault, which is a full Java in-house built Java stack application that has now eclipsed CRM and revenue as of last quarter also, which is a really good sign. That's allowed us to get outside of life sciences because manufacturing chemicals or manufacturing food or beverages or cosmetics looks very much like manufacturing pharmaceuticals. So we were able to sort of expand that, bring things like quality. The manufacturing quality processes are a big field of interest, and after having sort of completed that for life sciences, it's now translatable to all of the regulatory compliance that's needed, for example, for food manufacturing. So we landed P&G as a customer, as our first customer kind of outside life sciences, and it's just kind of continued from there. So thinking ahead about how to do that, we hit the $1 billion mark a year ahead of the projections that we made, and so now we're saying $3 billion by 2025. That's the bar we've put up there.
So no slowing down.
No slowing down. And
so do you know what the Act 3 and Act 4 are?
Yeah, well, that's what the startups are. So the startups are all to figure out sort of who becomes Act 3 and Act 4. Act 3 would be the outside life sciences kind of push. And then Act 4, well, who knows? Well, we've got 2 or 3 different startups in things like oncology and kind of focusing on how you build a LinkedIn of oncology, for example, like an actual network where you can exchange. We made 2 acquisitions, actually. One of them was sort of towards this year. How do you bring the medical community, including the mid-tier providers, doctors, CROs, everybody kind of together with one set of data they can all share to advance the field? Because if you ask Peter what Veeva's mission is, he'll say to extend human life and ease suffering, not be a great software company. So the big goal was always to how do you stand next to these companies that are doing things like this personalized medicine and these advancements, and walk with them, kind of down the path. So it's with many different viewpoints of how to advance the field of life sciences, you get some really cool kind of collective wins.
You wanted to talk about risk more, I think, associated to the CRM product for pharma.
Yeah, so if you ask Peter or Matt or the CFO Tim what Veeva's biggest risk was at the beginning, he'll immediately tell you it was betting the entire company on an unfounded technology platform, which was Force.com. Now, as you might imagine, Peter and Mark have a remaining great relationship, and they talk every quarter and all that. So it was the people thing that, plus, Peter knew the product really well, having worked with Mark. But it was the people thing and the belief that the company would continue and be able to actually support something completely different than Salesforce had ever had to support before. So nobody knew kind of how to do that. Force.com wasn't doing anything enterprise class with anybody at the time. They didn't even know how to structure the agreement. The economics were completely unfounded. The first version of the agreement was a total mess, like how the OEM relationship actually works. If we sell, do you have to have a Salesforce license too, or do we give that to you? Yeah, so now it's, we got it down. But at the beginning, that could have gone the wrong way, but it didn't. So Salesforce stood, right by us, and we're their largest ISV to the point where they'd have to restate earnings if we just disappeared. So they've been an awesome partner, and it was a good bet.
Well, it was in their best interest, right, to help figure it out and to work through whatever challenges were presented, given the fact that if it worked, there was a whole new line of business there for them, for their platform, that they had not yet tapped into and hadn't yet proven out.
Right, and that was the deals. Handshake agreement, life sciences is ours. You'll stay out of it directly, and then we're the product for Salesforce for life sciences. So, and then in return, they get a free revenue stream with no sales investment and no product investment. So.
Do you think that because I saw a post recently, it might have been Mark Andreessen, but it was somebody like that, if not him, and his post was, if you're a startup building on top of a platform that you don't own on a third-party platform, very risky, right? Because if that platform decides it wants to change, it wants to be in the business that you're in, you're screwed. Do you think that what has worked between Veeva and Salesforce could have worked if the relationship between Peter and Mark wasn't there? Because it sounds like at the beginning there was an awful lot of, hey, we're going to go do this, you're going to support us, but you're also not going to go into this space, this is going to be ours. If that personal relationship there wasn't there, it seems it would have been even riskier.
Absolutely. And it's hard to say. It's a very solid company with a good soul. So they're not, they do what they say they're going to do. They also believe in doing the right thing. So there was a good culture fit. There was a reason to believe, that they meant what they said. But even with all that out there and the level of trust, without that added layer of history, but personal history between the two, I think that would have been more than probably even our investors were willing to talk about. But we have in our Q and our K, when we report every quarter, we have to talk to risks like everybody else, and that's one we still continue to list. Is that remember, the whole CRM product line is built off Force.com. So what happens to Salesforce happens to us.
Competition. Seemingly, when you were just a CRM pharma company, probably no or virtually no competition. Has competition entered into that space? And in the other life sciences places where you're now playing, is there competition? And how much do you guys care about the competition, and how much do you pay attention?
We pay attention a lot, mostly through listening to how our customers talk about their options, how they look at strategy, and kind of how they're sort of casting their own IT roadmaps. But competition-wise, at the beginning, it was a bit of a blue ocean because customers that are our customers now were using either on-prem software that, like Oracle manufacturing or something like that, or some derivative of it that was customized for them. That they had in place, and it had in place for a long time, SAP maybe. So big ERP kind of manufacturing module, customized as it could be for their business is kind of where they were. So that's a pretty big leap from there to built just for your industry. It runs in the cloud. You don't need anything on premise anymore. Sort of leap, and it's kind of like how when India built their cellular network out, they just leapfrogged ahead like 5 generations because they didn't have to contend with all of the old as companies that or as countries that went incrementally did. You just sort of took this giant leap ahead, and now everything's more advanced than everyone else's is. It was a kind of same situation with some of those customers, right? Like I've had this on-premise software in place for the last 15 years. Nothing's come along. No innovations have really happened truly, and then all of a sudden we get to leap all the way to the cloud. Enterprise-grade security, enterprise-grade integrations, and there was that innovation leap. So there are companies that do what we do. We have had our share of litigation and sort of scruffles on the playground and stuff. But
is Alex still here? No, he would have perked up, at the litigation part.
Yeah, they usually take the form of things like that we believe stifle innovation. So like you can't load any of our data into a shared data network of any kind or anybody else's data warehouse, or it can't coexist in the same data warehouse with other data from other software companies. So we don't believe that, and we have the opposite approach. If the customer is using their product and our product and wants to load the Veeva data into that tool, fine, it's your data, go ahead, it's not our data. So that's another kind of let's push the whole industry forward thing, because that's not right. The data should belong to the customer and they should be free to use it. So there is competition for sure, and smart people trade roles sometimes between companies. But we think we've got the good high ground lane on this one. In fact, it's always a good sign that your customers are sort of volunteering to help you tell your story. Said we want to submit our story. We want to help your court case. So it sort of simmers on the side, but it's something we've actually started talking publicly about for the first time in the last 3 months or so, because we kind of don't like to get that close to the ground, I guess, and those kinds of things. But it's a do the right thing, so now we have to.
Right. So you've got a big job, global CIO for this big company as we've established. So how do you make sense of it all? How do you operate and execute well every hour and every day? What processes, routines do you have in place that allow you to do that?
So big believer in shared leadership. So I use my C's and V's and managers too to help me think through, okay, here's the challenge. Let's all get in a room and kind of talk about what our hill to climb looks like. We use hills to climb, just like attorneys general, you got to get used to putting the S in the right place. Instead of annual goals, they're very loosely defined. That was a little weird to get used to, because your entire set of annual goals, as far as Peter's concerned, is a bullet point list of 8 things, 6 things. From there, you're on your own as a senior leader to just, however you want to go make it happen, go make it happen. For me, that's a structured breakdown and cascading goals divided into quarters so that everyone knows what they're supposed to deliver.
I don't know. I like Peter more and more because I love me a bulleted list.
Yeah, and that's all he needs. That's all he wants. He kind of doesn't care about the rest of it. I do, but he wants to know about the big stuff. So I work with him. I actually, we communicate through email, or he calls me, but it's not much. He really wants his executive team to be geographically dispersed, so they're not all at corporate headquarters. Our chief people officer works out of her house in Florida, and I'm in Columbus. Each major their companies are so similar. I do that all the time, which is a sign of love.
People officer too, so
yeah, I know. Each major Veeva office has a site leader that's a member of Peter's executive team that's also responsible for Veeva culture and making sure it feels like Veeva and that it runs like Veeva. So I take that part of my job really seriously too. But yeah, I think quick decision making, using facts. We love the whole systems 1, systems 2 thinking fast and slow. If you haven't read that book, it's a great book. But there's a few books like that are sort of cult classics at Veeva that we operate by. Autonomy over alignment is another one that I take to heart inside IT and the other parts of my business. So that means that the business teams at Veeva, so if you own a product line, if you own Vault, or you own CRM, or if you own Veeva Align or whatever, you run on your own. You own your P&L. You cross-function with sales and services. That's yours. Same thing. General manager of China, Karen, she owns China. What happens in it? I support all of that, but what that means when the rubber meets the road is I have 4 different learning management systems. I have tons of duplication of enterprise systems and efforts. But again, eyes wide open, consciously choosing that because those 4 learning management systems were exactly the right choice for every business line that chose them. We have some sanity, of course. We obviously have one fine set of financial systems and one set of payroll systems and all of that. But beyond that, don't come ask me, in IT, can I have this, or what's our standard for this? So we really favor autonomy over aligning to standards, core standards. So that makes it a little crazy in IT, but it's well worth it for the speed.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to throw it up to the attendees for questions now. If you had to think about your time in Silicon Valley and your time, now here, what are the major differences, and does it really matter? Because I often, as we were talking about before with VCs and sort of organizations like Silicon Valley Bank, and Silicon Valley Bank seems to get it more than some VC firms do. Does there need to be that much of a difference, right? I mean, we've sort of, I don't know if it's because Silicon Valley Bank or Silicon Valley has wanted to create, this sort of aura that there's a big difference between operating in Silicon Valley and operating somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Does it really matter at the end of the day, other than, it's just, it just costs more?
It definitely costs a lot more. So here's a little factoid we were talking about. I was looking to hire a staff level security engineer at either our corporate headquarters office or here. The going rate for 5 years of experience in security, especially security engineering on the application side, is well over $300K in the Bay Area right now. Nobody would touch a job for less than that, which is ridiculous. So the interest.
You better be a $1 billion company to have a team of $300,000 people running around.
Yeah, well, a lot of engineering is still in Silicon Valley, and but that's changing though. So a lot of these Valley companies are figuring out after they're founded and start growing that that's not tenable, right? Your path to a 40% operating margin is not I'm hiring all of my engineers in Northern California. It's okay, where's the talent? It's in Columbus, Ohio. It's in these cities that hold the keys to this great education process, and especially a city like Columbus, because look at the other companies in the region, right? I mean, we have banks, we've got healthcare, we've got those. I'm able to find excellent security professionals, for example, because I get people that are familiar with the power grid and how to secure it. I get people that come out of banking and know how to secure, work within regulations and government regulations. So that getting a well-rounded person like that is becoming key to the Valley companies to figure out how you actually scale and grow. So, okay, awesome, I got my funding, I've got 10 people, I've got 100 people, oh God, right. What's my payroll gonna look like after I'm at 1,000 people? So they're figuring that out, but the next step after that will be to figure out that you don't have to be founded there in the first place, right? Now that's started, which is great. You see Drive Capital and Mark Kwame and all those guys that have moved out here years ago that are starting to fund, and you've got Rev1 and all this great local support. I can tell you that it has to be there over the whole continuum though. So there have to be angels, there have to be stage 1, there have to be late stage, there has to be this kind of whole continuum of support so that you don't get stuck in one of those, kind of unable to emerge until your healthy bottom line is generating revenue and customers every week. Because if you don't bridge every single one of those gaps, then you create these choke points. But we're getting to the place now where that's actually possible. And all of this is actually coming out of places outside Silicon Valley, which is great.
Yeah, I think we're still in the process of removing some of those choke points holistically. I still think a lot of companies get to stages where they experience those choke points. We don't have enough early stage funding sort of across the board in markets like Columbus because pre-seed and seed funding has virtually dried up because everybody that was investing in pre-seed and seed stages has moved up to Series A because it's really hard to make a return and make money at the pre-seed and seed stage. So we have angels, and then everybody else has sort of moved up to Series A, so now we've got this pre-seed seed gap that I think we've got to figure out how to resolve if we're not going to have choke points along the evolution for companies.
Yeah.
especially from a funding perspective.
Yeah, that's a great insight.
Okay, who's got questions for Catherine?
What's A funding?
An A round is just a level of venture capital. Typically, a company is going to have a pretty serious level of customers at that point, recurring revenue that you hear positioned as either AR or MRR, and it's typically a couple of $1 million. But I mean, it's all over the map now. I mean, companies are raising Series A rounds that are tens and twenties millions of dollars. And it used to be where an A round was 1 to 5 million, maybe 1 to 10 million, and then became 1 to 20 million, and now it's sort of across the board. That the categorizations and those labels don't really mean anything from an actual legal or technical perspective. Those are just labels the industry has given to different venture capital funding rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything to that?
No, that was a perfect description.
So when you hear things like pre-seed, seed, Series A round, Series B round, they're bullshit labels. They actually don't mean anything other than some current categorization of different funding levels.
I actually use that. So when we engage in any partnership with any other organization, I mean, it could be buying something from them or any connection we create, including our IT partners, I actually look at that. Who are your founders? Where'd they come from? How many series rounds of funding did you go through? Because if you're on F or something, then I'm kind of wondering if you're going to be able to keep going and if you're going to be there for me to continue to license your software. So those mechanics, I think, can tell part of the story of who is the company and how healthy is the idea. So.
Yeah, and there are. The longer, if a company has to keep raising money through the process, at some point, there's a risk associated to that because they've not gotten to the point of being able to be funded out of operations. And then it becomes a more risky proposition for everybody involved. Mm-hmm. Question back there?
Sure, thank you for talking with us tonight and sharing the story. I'm curious, so to sustain that 20% plus year-to-year growth of the fact that your clients and customers are advocating, like what's the narrative then to continue to create those opportunities and expand into other networks? How are you guys talking about yourselves when you're moving outside of life sciences and pharmaceutical into and some of these other manufacturing categories? And like, what's that marketing message sound like?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we didn't get that right on the first try because we launched this cleverly named OLS, Outside Life Sciences Unit, with a guy to run it, and he just kind of started making rain and going out there.
You could have
and
given the guy a better business
I know.
unit name.
Frank is like he's a fire. He's fine, but. We didn't really understand the sales rhythm and kind of the purchasing patterns of that outside life sciences group. So Frank would get out there and he'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna, I got a lot of people that are interested, and so this will probably start to materialize in another year." But it wasn't. It was more like 2 longer sales cycles in some areas than others, and then some that were shorter. So. The Louis Vuitton group, Sephora, and a couple of the cosmetics manufacturers actually came on really fast because they just didn't have a solution in their space. So being able to submit basics, right? So because the quality and compliance piece looks mechanically extremely similar, right? You've got a governing body, you've got some electronic way to submit trial documentation, quality and testing documentation, you get a result, you keep track of what's what in the software and who's got to sign off. That kind of works the same way, right? For a large governed process. So those were directly applicable. But things like food manufacturing and working with CPG companies, there was a much greater sort of length and weight and number of people to talk to and test to pass. So we are on track, but succeeding in areas we didn't expect to and not in areas where we thought we'd be ahead. So marketing wise, we talk a lot in terms of, the products have slightly different names and so forth so that we can differentiate them, but we really talk in terms of how the mechanics work because they sound familiar to the people responsible for things like governance, no matter where you sit. Plus, we found that the people themselves are the same people, right? So, the guy that's at chemical manufacturing one day is going to be at Abbott Labs the next day, and then he's going to be over at Kroger. So there's a lot of fungibility of people and resources in that space too. So once Veeva kind of catches on, it gets sort of, there's a you know, a crosswind that sort of takes the fire with it. So that's helped actually too.
We'll go here and then we'll go there. That way we won't kill Katie trying to run across the room.
So super interesting. Be sure to be too loud. So I'm thinking, I'm interested in your role, fast forwarding 20 years, right? You can't talk to all these startups. Are you going to end up with 27 different technology stacks to support? You know, so you mentioned Salesforce and Java and Ruby and Python. And what do you think about that?
That's also a good question. So because our product owners can pick whatever tech stack they want, we have all of them, I think. I mean, we have Ruby code, we've got, you know, some Microsoft stuff going on somewhere, I'm not sure why, and we've got a lot of, you know, Java stuff. It's good for some stuff. I wouldn't pay all that license to develop on it. But anyway, but it's true though, right? So it's the way we solved for that is that we didn't try to centralize that piece of it. So I don't manage any of that. The DevOps teams all manage that for their own teams. So they go do whatever they want. Now, when it's time to deploy code to production, now I'm interested. So I have to figure out what it is that you have and, you know, what the production environment needs to look like. But I've been lucky on things like ALM tooling because they all pick the same thing. They all picked Atlassian tools or GitLab or whatever. So that's actually not been too bad. But the underlying tech stack, that's also going to start to cause scaling problems on the security side because we have to ensure we buy security tooling that's compatible with enough things that, you know, we don't have to buy all of the security tooling there is in order to effectively cover everything. So that's something I could see coming, but we're going to have to perhaps create a conversation around how to proliferate it to the point where it could still be managed. It's a problem we have to solve for it, and it's one we knowingly bought with the model that we picked.
Yeah.
First, thank you for being here. I actually use your product, the CRM product, every day. So very interested to hear about how everything got started. My question is about features and how you evaluate feature requests from your pharmaceutical companies, those particular customers.
Why have you submitted one?
I was just going to ask that.
No, I haven't, but I'm very interested to see what some of the internal teams are looking for to then push out to Salesforce.
Yeah, it's a great question. How do you guys balance your sort of roadmap and vision for the product and balance feedback you're getting from customers? Yeah,
so the art of product management is kind of that three-legged stool. It's what do you think the competition is doing? What are the sales blockers right now in the sales cycle? And what are your customers telling you they need? And you have to figure out how to sew together the product roadmap with all three of those inputs. To get the input from customers, we rely on our sales process is a little strange. So it's, you have one contact. Do you know who your Veeva account executive is? Or? Okay, you don't? Okay. So hopefully somebody, where are you, Cardinal? Or? Oh, okay, great. Okay. I can look that up on my phone when I when I get done. But
you can make an account manager introduction.
Absolutely. No, we try to create a permanent relationship, and we also only operate on reference selling. So there's no cold calling. The process is very it's partner driven. I think we don't actually pay our salespeople commission. They're all on salary. They succeed or fail as a team. So we really try to make the interactions with our field team all point towards listen to the customer and work with the customer. So have you had, I mean, maybe we could talk later about if you've had any issues or you just want to know how the...
No, I mean,
okay.
There's always, with the size of the companies that you guys are selling to and large sales forces, a lot of times there's a gap in communication between sales forces and people making decisions on how to choose software. A lot of it's still very antiquated that we particularly use, not Veeva, but rarely do we see technology people coming to the field to understand what day-to-day activities are like, what features may be most beneficial and have most value. So I have no idea who the Veeva person is.
Well, I will find out for you. We do send developers that are working with specific products to customer sites to just sit there and work with them and watch and listen and learn. And there's a lot of ways to kind of absorb that information and stay really close to kind of what's needed. In fact, we expect our general managers to know off the top of their head, what are your customers asking you for? What are the top 10 things that you need to do based off that? So I will get with you after and make sure we, because now I'm interested, because I want to make sure we hear from you.
Well, I mean, the key to building good, successful products is to understand the problem.
Yeah.
At an expert level, right? Because I don't think you have any chance of building a successful product if you don't. And so early on, the team must have understood life sciences, or at least gotten to the point of understanding life sciences well enough to know that the CM product that was getting built was going to provide value.
Yeah, everybody at the company either came in from a life sciences background or a software engineering background and learned, and it's about half and half. So we really tried to kind of build that in from the ground up, so that we could, provide something with a level of expertise that made sense. Otherwise, you're just building software, and that's that's not the point. The point is to solve the problem. So
Yeah, it often gets missed though. Please help me thank Catherine for joining us tonight.
all right. Thanks, everybody. All right.
Very much.
Yeah, absolutely. That was fun.